Hi there. Today's tutorial is going to be based off the development workshop Programming Logic 1. On page 9 of the development workshop, I describe a very low-level vLookup type item. In the the YouTube readout that I created, I had described that I was using 10,000 or 100,000 lines, and on sheet 2 I was using 10 lines. I haven't populated that many for this exercise, but what I did do is create for you inside Excel 1 to 100. And I'm not going to be color coding it as yellow as I talked about in the tutorial. I'm just going to be putting a number in the B column beside it. But the logic is very similar. I don't really use color coding, and this is a more popular method that I use. On sheet 2, we have 3 numbers, as you see here. So all this is, there's nothing special happening here yet. What you do is you hold down Alt F11, and it will bring up this interface like this. This is the standard interface that you'll be looking at and writing all your code into. You can grab the window at the top and pull it down if you want to see VBA behind it and what exactly is happening here. You can resize this window. Obviously there's nothing here yet to write with, so we go to Insert and go to Module. It opens the first module. It'll display it right here. You can right click it, you can change the name if you want, call it whatever you want. Actually, you rename it right here. I always leave it Module 1 unless you're going to build a library of modules, but for now we're just going to write some code into here. I'm going to write it very basically to start off with. The first thing we do is type in the word sub. Sub is just the start of our macro. I'm not going to be creating functions here. I'm just going to create a small macro that's going to work through the tutorial definitions and show you basics of the vLookup. So we write the word sub. It doesn't have to be capitalized. It can be sitting right where it is. Type sub, and I'll call it James vLookup. Hit enter. It will tell you sub. It'll start James vLookup and end sub. Usually put a few spaces between it so we get room to work. Now, the first thing we do is select sheet 2. So we put sheets 2 in brackets dot select. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to comment this area, we can comment it, and I'll comment these as I go so we can see how this relates to the development workshop. You put a single quote like that, and you type here, well, whatever you want. This will select sheet 2. You hit enter, you see it turns green. Excel VBA will capitalize things for you as you go, as you see here. We go down. This will select sheet 2, which sheet 2 looks like this. And then in the programming logic area, we determine the last row used on sheet 2. So I'll make a variable, and I'll put it up here, and I'll call it sheet 2 last row as long. I'll just use long for now. You could use integer if you want. And this will define the sheet 2 last row variable as a long type. And then we'll set that simply to 3. So sheet 2 last row equals 3. Because you see here we have 1, 2, 3. There's code that you can write that will actually determine the last row for you, but I'll get into that later. I'm just showing you the very basics right now. This will set 3 list items into the variable called sheet 2 last row. The third piece is set an array. To set an array, which is the list within the system memory, we do it very simply by typing the word redim. This is for redimensionalize it. Obviously we haven't dimensioned this one first. Don't ask why it works like this. This is just the standard definition and ways that we recreate an array. There's obviously a reason for this, but I'm not going to explain it right now because I've never used it, not in 5 years of programming. So we type redim, we call it whatever we want. We'll call it sheet 2 array list as string. Now this is not complete because we need to put in brackets how many list items we're going to use. Now when you make an array, it doesn't start at 1, it starts at 0. It's just the way it works. So if we put in, sorry, let me get rid of that. If we put in here this exact number here, we'd have 3 elements, which is too many because it starts at 0. So we have to subtract 1 off it. So we'll use sheet 2 last row minus 1. And I'll put a comment here. This will dimensionalize the array using 3 spots in memory, 0 to 2. So 0 to 2 means that the first element is 0, the second is 1, and the third is 2. Obviously we have 3 numbers we want to store in this array, so we're going to do 0 to 2. This will give us enough room within this small array to hold all 3 of these numbers. And then we search through each row and place the account numbers in the array. So to do that we use a loop. I'll use a for loop for this. For j. J is just a variable that's undefined. You can define it if you want, but for numbers like this it always works. For j equals 1, 2, 3. So this starts the loop. It goes through it 3 times. It goes from 1, 2, 3. We have to close it. Next j. That's just the way that you set up in a loop. So anything within here will loop through however many times you've set up. So this loop will do all of the code within it 3 times. 0 first, 1 first, 2 second, 3 third, and then it ends. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go from cells A1, A2, and A3 and put the contents of those into the array. I understand that this is not simple as I'm writing it, and I apologize about this. I'm going to post this up on the message board and come to the message board and take a look and write, ask me questions. Come to me at work, ask me questions, do whatever you want. Ask me your questions on this and I'll try to help define this. Later in the development workshop I go more into different types of coding. This is just a sample. So you don't have to worry if you don't learn this. You don't have to type all this comment stuff in if you want to type this in your own way on your own computer and take a look at it. So for j equals 1 to 3, what we're going to do is we're going to select the first cell. You type cells, open bracket. When you open the bracket, it'll tell you row index or column index. The row is 1, 2, or 3. Because we're looping through the rows, we're going to use j. That uses the j variable, whatever j actually equals. And column is, we'll use a, like that. Close bracket, dot select. This will select the cell A1 for the first loop, A2 for the second loop, etc. So it'll go through 3 times. First it selects A1, so A1, and then when it hits the loop the second time, it turns j into 2. J becomes 2. This is A2. On the last one, j becomes 3. So it's looping 1, 2, 3. The last one, it becomes j. Now we need to take the data within that cell and not just select it. Otherwise, all it'll do is this. It'll go bang, bang, bang. It doesn't actually do anything. So we have to put those contents into the array. So he puts sheet 2 array list in brackets. We'll put j minus 1. Because when we start off j equals 1 and we want to align it into our array, see how we have here 0 to 2? Well, we have to subtract 1 off of the current loop number. So in this instance, we want to start off at the 0 element in the array and go from there. So that sheets 2 array list equals active cell dot text. We just type that. This takes the, well, whatever you want to call it, account number from the current cell and puts it into the array element, which is in alignment with j minus 1. Okay, so what this has done, it now goes through each of these elements. It starts here, and it goes from there, and it takes that number and puts it in element 0 in the array. So your list number 0. This account number goes in the list number 1, and this number goes in the list number 2. Okay, so that's all set up. Code's pretty simple from my point of view. I don't think it's as simple from your point of view, and so unfortunately, and I'm sorry about that, but I will go back to the code and I'll define all these items and show exactly how they work. The programming logic on this is what we're getting at in this development workshop piece. Now we go back to sheet 1, sheets1.select. So it'll go back to sheet 1. Now it's taken everything off sheet 2, so we actually could delete sheet 2 if we wanted to, but I'll leave it for now. Sheet 1. And then the next piece is determine the last row used in sheet 1. So I'll go back to the top here, and I'll call this one, I'll put a comment here and put sheet 1 last row. So again, I'm just going to cheat here. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, find the last row used, which is 100. And I'm going to make sheets 1 last row equals 100. This will set 100 list items into the variable called sheet 1 last row. Now it's not actually list items, I'm just using that because that was the definition we used above. It's actually just setting the variable called sheet 1 last row to equal the number 100. It's as simple as that. Sheet 1 last row equals 100. Then we go to cell A1 and go through the entire account list from sheet 2. So what we need to do here is we need to start a loop, and we're going to go 0 to 100 just as we did above. So for j equals 1 to 100. You don't have to use j, you can put in any word you want there. I can call this James if I wanted. Anyway, this loop will do all of the code within it 100 times, just as we saw above. Above we did 1 to 3, here we're doing 1 to 100. We have to close the loop, otherwise we'll get a syntax error when we try to run it. It's just the way code has to be written. I can put a comment there for you too. This is the close of the James loop. And as I saw here, I didn't call it J, I called it James. So that's just how that works. Then we look back to the programming logic, and it goes through everything within this cell as many times as is on sheet 2. So first we will go to the cell. We'll go j a dot select. This selects to start cell A1, then A2 on the second loop, all the way to A100. Okay, so it'll start off here. It'll select this cell. On the second loop, it'll select that cell. Third, it'll select this cell. And then we're going to make another loop inside this loop to scroll through and try to find these numbers. So inside this one, we open the code. We make another loop called for, I don't know, I'll call it Malik. That's my last name. Equals 1 to sheet 2 last row. Now what this is going to do, as we saw above here, we defined this and called it number 3. So we carry that to down here, and this makes a new loop going from 1 to 3. 3 was the number we set above. So that will take us through another loop. We need to close this loop called next malloc. Now, next piece here, what we have to do is we have to do a comparison. So what we're going to do is look at anything that's within that array we set above the sheets to array list and we compare it to this value. So we will do if. The if is a statement that says if something happens, then do something. So what we'll see here is if sheets to array list malloc -1 equals active cell dot text, then we're going to do something. I'm going to put a comment here. This is a comparison of the array elements from sheet 2 to the current cell account number. Obviously, it doesn't have to be an account number. That's just what I'm looking at right now because that's what we're familiar with. And then it does something. So we're going to go cells J B column dot select. Now from here we're going to put something in the B column beside it. So what it's going to do, if it finds this number on the second sheet row list, it's going to put something here. I'll say active cell dot value equals account found. That's going to just dump something in there into the J2 column. So if it found a matching account number out of these three numbers, exactly the way it appears, if that was in that list, it would go here and it would put the word account found. Yep. And then end if. Whenever you use an open if statement, you have to use the word end if. We'll get rid of all the remaining spaces here just to clean things up. And then we'll get rid of the spaces here as well. I'm not going to sort this list. I'm just going to leave it and let you see how it works. So this will select the found account numbers B column cell. This puts the word account found in the B column. The B column. This double quote is a syntax error. If I hit go, it would conk out. So I gotta put a single quote there. All those green words don't make a difference. And then this is to close the if statement. The next piece on the development module audio breakdown, I'm going to just define the if statement and show you how to use it better. But as you're seeing here, this is the way it works. There's a lot of things that go into this beyond just what you see here. This is the closing piece of the malloc loop. Now that's all the code we need to use. Before we run it, you should save it. So go back here, go to File. This is Excel 2013, but your Excel 2010 you have, or whichever version, may look a little different, but always save as. Put it wherever you want to put it. I'm just going to dump this on my desktop. You have to change this thing to Excel macro enabled workbook. If you don't, the system will prompt you. We'll call it PracticeModule1TutorialPiece. See, if I don't change this, keep it Excel workbook, I hit save, it says blah. You have macros in it. To continue this as a macro free workbook, say yes, I don't want to do that. I want to come back here and change it to this. It's Excel macro enabled workbook. XLSM is what it's called instead of XLSX. Hit save, everything's good. You see the name changes up here. Then we're going to run it and it'll go through all the steps. Now we go Alt F8. Alt F8 brings up your macro list. You can also run it from the code area in this little window, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'll run it from right here. And obviously I found an error in my code. So subver function not defined. This is sheets 2 array list. I call this sheet array list. So what I need to do is stop my code, put an S in here, and then I'll go back and rerun it. This is the way that you debug your code. We'll run it. and you'll go through and you see that nothing happened. Why didn't it happen? Well, what we'll do is we'll go back to our code and we'll see why nothing happened. This is the best spot to look at. You click this little side piece, it opens up this step, and what it'll do is it'll show you exactly what's happening. We're going to run it. It gets there, and what's actually happened, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is in the sheets array list. Malloc is 1, -1 is 0, and then the active cell is 4, 2, 3, 1, 9, 8. It's not going to find that as a comparison, so we're finding an issue here. So what we're going to look at is, why did we find an error here? Because I put the word J. J is stuck up here from the top. It's not going to work. So close this, put James here and James here, because James is the name I called this loop at the bottom. J was the one I called at the top. Now I'll rerun it. You see it's gone through the code and it found all these accounts. It did it not very quickly. You saw the screen pause. You can hide all this stuff from happening, make it go a lot faster, and I'll show you how to do it later. I'm just leaving it open right now so we see the code. So what it's found is the count numbers here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 2, 4, 5, and 3. So there's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it found the account. There's 3, it found the account. There's the 4, 2, 4, 5. Again, I have these numbers repeated currently throughout the code. So it found it many times. Now you double click here, it'll set the row widths for you, and you could sort it yourself if you want to. I'm not going to show the sort code because I think that this code is long enough as a starting piece, so I'm not going to bother with that. I'll just sort, and then it shows all the account numbers here, and those are the exact same account numbers on sheet 2. This is a very simple method of VLOOKUP code. You can do anything you want with it. This is the piece I'm going to start off with because I think that this is long enough as we go. I'm going to put this code like this. I'm going to also recreate it, open this up for you, and take the comments out and show you the code without comments. No comments. You just take them all, just rip them out of there, and type them. Get rid of this to here. We're just going to get rid of. This is just a cleanup. You don't ever have to do this. I'm just showing you a very simple method of how code looks when it doesn't have all these comments in it. Comments do not add any value other than describing the code for you or using instructions, listing them out for other people to use, etc. Once you get used to it, this code here will be very, very simple. So you see how clean this code looks. It's all structured. It has proper indents, proper spacing, changing certain events because we started another loop here. It has the pieces here where it changes the rows. It's all split up. It sets all your dimensions at the top. We can't dimensionalize this one at the top because we had to set this number 3 before we got here. Same thing here. I could set 100, but usually I'm going to go to sheet 1 and then use a bit of code to tell me what this 100 is so I don't actually have to set it this way. Now obviously right here I can put that. That's the same thing. Since I set this to 100, it'll go 1 to 100 here. This is the proper way of doing it. Otherwise, there was really no reason to set this variable. The word James here is used here, 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 and here. It's just to navigate around the first spreadsheet. Malloc is used in the loop that we used originally from sheet 2. And that's the way the code looks with no comments in it. It's a lot easier to look at than the comments here, but they both do the exact same thing. When you look them up in the macro list, you'll see them here. This is a very easy way of getting around your items. You can declare all your variables above if you wanted to, like up in this section above here, and they can be used in both of these macros. So you can reuse definitions and variables within all your pieces. And I'll go into that another time, not right now. That's your macro. I'm going to post this exact macro and all the code onto the message board as well, right below where you see this tutorial. Thank you. Bye now.